This doll has been a long time coming, not only for the fact that with my Rose doll, my Martha doll, and then with my Donna doll, this was the next foreseeable step, but also because I bought the original supplies to make this doll way back at the beginning of 2021. So as we get started, I'm actually going to skip past the outfit creation process because I don't have a lot of footage from that section. It's really hard for me to make sure that I stop and take pictures and videos while I'm in that space, but I do have a few photos from making the iconic coat that I will talk about here in just a little bit. For now, let's jump ahead and talk about the doll customization process itself. Now, I've talked a lot about how picking the right facial sculpt is the most important part of the customization process. Yet I still don't take my own advice, and I'm not exactly sure why that is. Finding a facial sculpt for the 10th Doctor was a little bit tough, and unfortunately, I did choose the wrong one initially, like I did with Donna. For a lot of the time that Ken has been around, there have been two different types of heads. So there's the one type that just goes from side to side instead of being fully movable like a lot of the Barbies are, and the second type, which is like a lot of the Barbies are. The problem being, since I'm putting this doll's head onto a made-to-move body, the type of head that I use has to be the second kind. And that's very unfortunate because I did find a facial sculpt that is spot on, practically in every way spot on, but it was the wrong type of head, and so that limited the amount of faces that I had to choose from. That being said, that wasn't the only reason that I messed up. I actually went through all the trouble of finding the Emmett from Twilight, and it wasn't until literally the day before I was about to start working on his face that I was like, actually, something is wrong with this. And it is a lot too round on the chin part, which in some ways does look like 10. There are some ways that it does look like him, but overall it's just wrong. It's a little bit more of like a Misha Collins facial sculpt than a David Tennant facial sculpt. And so I went through all that time and all that money just to realize that the facial sculpt I was actually going to use was the one that came on the made-to-move body. Once I had found the facial sculpt that worked for me, everything kind of snapped into place a little bit more. But this facial sculpt also wasn't perfect, which did mean that I had to improvise a little bit. I ended up getting some epoxy sculpt, which basically works like a clay and bonding material all in one. And I used this to fix his nose being the problem with this facial sculpt. While working with this, I needed to make sure that the color of epoxy sculpt that I mixed together was close enough to his face color that it wasn't going to be noticeable. I wasn't able to get it 100% perfectly matched, but I never really anticipated being able to do that anyways. I got it fairly close, enough so that unless you're really looking for it, it's not super duper noticeable, and I think overall it helps make the facial sculpt look a little bit more like the character. I also had to use the epoxy sculpt in a way that I wasn't really hoping to. I was attempting to get his hairline to look correct. Unfortunately, this is not it. As it turns out, in this fairly disturbing picture, you can see that this here white line is where the hairline was supposed to be. And this is where it's at. So today what I'm going to have to do is remove all of these hair plugs, which I put in, by the way. Those weren't there, right? So I messed it up. And it's going to leave holes. That's just the reality I live in, where there's going to be holes in his forehead. The good news is because of the hairstyle that he has, it's not noticeable at all. In fact, if I wouldn't have told you, you probably wouldn't have even noticed they were there. Other than that, the reroute process mostly went according to plan. The only extra step I really had was adding extra holes to the side of his head. I had to do this because of the original hairstyle that came on the doll. However, the real trouble was I've never really done a more masculine hairstyle. As I've stated before, I'm not a hairstylist. That is my least favorite part of creating these dolls. But I also got to work with a new medium which I had never prior. I wanted to add the sideburns, and the easiest way to do that would be to add flocking, and that was a lot of fun to work with. The only big struggle I had doing the flocking was trying to get flocking that matched the hair color. And when I'm getting these products from Etsy, it's really a little bit difficult because I can't see exactly what the hair colors are going to look like until they get to my house. You can expect a level of difference between what you see in the picture and what you're going to get. And a lot of times that's not a huge difference, but it can be just enough sometimes. And that's not the fault of the Etsy creators. It's just the way it is when you buy offline. But I was able to get a very, very nice match between these two colors, which elevated the project a lot. When getting ready to repaint this doll's face, I ended up deciding to use a pretty even 50-50 split when it came to colored pencils and paint. When looking back on my previous projects, I kind of realized that one or the other is not necessarily better in my experience, because my Martha doll has a great face, but it is a lot more subdued and less vibrant than my Rose doll per se, which is 100% acrylic paint. That said, Rose's face is also a little less accurate in some of the features because I didn't have as much control with the paintbrush as I did with the colored pencils, which is why with my Donna Noble doll and leading into this doll, I tried to merge the two together properly. So when it came to the repaint, most of what you'll see on the eyes is paint. The whites of the eyes are paint, the irises are paint, the pupils are paint. So what I ended up using the colored pencils for was the mouth to get a little bit more of a natural look, and then also around the eyes so that I could blend everything into the facial sculpt so it didn't look so painted on and manufactured. Now that we've talked about pretty much everything else, we can round back around to the outfit, which is actually the thing that I completed first. I won't go into too much detail, but I will outline a few of the more interesting aspects of creating this outfit. Starting with the suit itself, the pinstripe suit fabric was a little bit harder to find than I anticipated. So I ended up looking on Spoonflower and found this beautiful custom 10th Doctor inspired fabric, which I ordered right away, and it turned out wonderful. I actually made 2 ties for this doll. The one he is wearing is the tie from the 50th anniversary special. I decided to do that one because I didn't want a tie that would pin him down to a certain companion. Even though I'm pretty sure that's not really how it works, I've seen most of the ties he wears reused throughout all 3 of his seasons. But I thought just to be safe, the one I want him to wear most often is going to be the 50th anniversary special. I did hand embroider both ties, which gives them a little flair, but does mean they're a little bulkier. On a previous 10th Doctor doll attempt, I made a variation of a tie, which was essentially just a tie shape connected to a scrunchie that you could slide over his head. And on that one, I used fabric paint to create the design. And while that one's a lot more precise and seems on the surface a little bit more accurate, I do like the texture and the vibrance that you get with the embroidery. The shoes are very interesting to me because I used the same set of Ken Converse type shoes that I bought for my first 10th Doctor doll. I did that mostly because I'm trying to cut back on costs a little bit, and also if it isn't broke, don't fix it. All I had to do with these is give them a fresh coat of paint, and they look way more vibrant, way more accurate, and they bring the whole outfit together. Now, by far my favorite part about making this outfit was the coat. I love the material that I found to use. Going in, I actually didn't realize that this was going to be as hand sewing intensive as it ended up being, but that was totally fine by me. In some of my more recent projects, I've been leaning more into hand sewing because it just is a requirement when you're doing such small handiwork. And overall, the coat turned out beautifully. I love the way that all the pieces combine together and just make the whole doll a way better representation of the 10th Doctor. I think this is one of my favorite projects that I've ever made, no doubt because I have worked on it for so long, and finally seeing the final product is just so exciting for me.